business meeting. So we'll just try to be as quiet as we can. We have a very squeaky floor. So when you're walking around, walk lightly, okay? Now, we originally were going to have 4 local candidates, and the list keeps growing. So we're going to keep it short for each of you. And then we're going to take a 10-minute break. And then as our final speaker is Colin Van Osten, who hasn't arrived yet, but I'm sure he'll be here. Now, I'd like to welcome all of the people who are either existing candidates or former candidates. And there are so many of you here. What I'd like to do is to have everybody stand up and just say, here I am. Okay, so all of you who are former or existing candidates, please stand up. When they say this is candidate night, we meant it. Okay, so we have our minutes from the May meeting on the website, and I would like a motion to approve the minutes. So moved. Second? Second, that was Stephanie. All in favor? Opposed? That's not surprising. And okay, so our treasurer, Bill Neesham, is not here tonight. So we don't have a treasurer's report, but I'd like to make an announcement, and that is that we have found a headquarters. Yes. This was probably the toughest year we've ever had finding a place. We tried to find a place on Main Street. There's nothing available, and that is a wonderful credit to the town of Plymouth that everything is full. So Steve Rand came to many of you know Steve Rand from Rand's Hardware and also a former representative. He has a place that's just behind the Lucky Dog and right next to Grotto. So we are going to have a lot of good food. So we are renting that as we have 1 room as of July 1st and 2 rooms as of August 1st. Deb Reynolds, our former senator, is working on the lease with NHDP, and NHDP is paying for it in full. Yes. So that is really great news. And, you know, in the summertime, the staff from Organized New Hampshire will be there, and then we will be, after the primary is done, then we will be in there full force with our manager, Val Scarborough, who is known statewide as running the best headquarters around. So we are looking for a small air conditioner. If anybody has one, let me know. Okay. We line up at 9 o'clock behind the firehouse. And so we'll be there. Gunner's going to have his truck, and we will be there with buntings and flags and hopefully lots of candidates. We don't have a lot of signage, so if you're a candidate, bring your own sign, okay? But we want a big turnout. It's an important presence in our community. Let's see. So tonight as I said, we start out with a few candidates and they keep growing. So I'm going to start out right away with our candidate for Campton, Janet Lucas. Janet. Janet's been part of our organization for a long time, so we are delighted she finally took the plunge. Good evening. Can you hear me?
Oh, since I've never done karaoke. The circumstances that brought me here this evening, so that led me to run for Grafton County District 7 very recently, literally within the last couple of weeks. Tommy Hoyt, speaking to you right now. I hope he is healing and getting stronger every day. I'm very sorry for his absence, which we all understand has a lot of repercussions. We all waited and hoped, as the filing deadline approached, that a candidate would step forward. Democrats are so close to gaining a majority in the House that giving up a seat in the House for lack of a candidate seemed to be an insult to our small d democratic process. So I filed in response to my own conscience about this matter, and with the belief that I do have what it takes to run a campaign and serve in Plymouth. My wife Cheryl introduced me to Canton, New Hampshire. I soon came to cherish the natural beauty of the area and to appreciate its residents who so carefully steward its resources and heritage. After retirement, I moved to Canton permanently in June of 2019. I then went gratefully to join my sister and mother to help with the challenges of my mom's declining health during the COVID pandemic. They were living in a southern state where the governor withheld the first vaccines from all folks who hadn't voted for him. So only the districts that went for him received those vaccines from the first round. Horrifying. My background includes medical.
What happened?
That requires discipline.
Something happened.
There's a second mic. Dying battery. It could be the battery. That's why there's two.
Yes, that's Thank you. My background includes a medical education that required discipline and hard work and a career based on service, education, and leadership. I practiced and taught obstetrics and gynecology for 37 years in 2 different community hospital systems in Columbus, Ohio. I served on various hospital committees, and I led our department as chairperson during a transition time for our residency when we combined programs with Ohio State University. My civic engagement in Canton was initially limited by the pandemic to online meetings. I now enjoy serving actively as a conservation commissioner, a Canton representative on the Pemmy River Local Advisory Committee, and I'm a member of the Zoning Board of Adjustment. I begin this process with some fundamental beliefs. A good representative is a good listener to each and every constituent. Whatever can be done to serve the best interests of our community, I will do to the best of my ability. I will uphold the following values as close to my heart. There is nothing more important than our representative democracy and each individual's right to participate safely and free from harassment. Women's reproductive rights are human rights and must be guaranteed by enshrinement in the New Hampshire State Constitution. Our natural environment must be protected in order for Campton to thrive and sustainably grow into a community that supports year-round affordable living. Public money should be used for public education.
Yay.
Assault weapons must be banned.
Yay.
And I believe the key to all of those is diversity in our government. I want to thank Joyce for giving me this time and the opportunity to speak with all of you. And I'll leave you with one thought. This was from Monday night when we were at the Women's Reproductive Rights Rally at the State House. There was a sign, and it said, "Not voting is the main cause of unwanted presidencies."
Thank you, Janet Lucas, and good luck. Okay, next, I think I'll bring up Karen Leon Hill, who is a last minute entry. And here she is.
Hi, everyone. My name is Karen Leo Hill. I have had the pleasure of being your Grafton County Treasurer for the last 8 years. And thank you. And I'm also a 20-year city councilor and former mayor in Lebanon. I'm running for the executive council, which I got to speak briefly about a few months ago when I also shared a song on the piano and you all sang along. It was great. And so I just, by way of introduction, I'll just say that on the campaign trail, I've been sharing the story of my mother, Lynn. She died of cancer when I was 6 years old. She was 33. She had cervical cancer, the kind of cancer that's typically discovered in routine reproductive health care, the kind of health care that Republicans on the executive council have been voting to defund repeatedly. Now, when my father was left with 3 children under the age of 7, he was able to keep our family going and his small roofing business thanks to the help of Social Security. Later on, as a young single college student facing an unplanned pregnancy, my daughter Marina was born 10 weeks early, and I was able to go back to school with an infant and finish my studies thanks to the help of Medicaid that covered her 5-week stay in the neonatal intensive care unit. I know firsthand the power of government to improve people's lives. It's why I've dedicated my career, my 20-year career, to public service. It's why I'm so passionate about government, and it's why I'm really excited to be stepping up to bring my skills, my knowledge, my experience to the state level as executive counselor for District 2. So I look forward to campaigning with all of you. I'll be in the parade with you on Wednesday, and I will see you on the campaign trail. Or Thursday.
I would hate to have her come on Wednesday and find nobody there. Okay, next is Katie Wood Hedberg. You can tell she's a well-loved local.
Thank you, Joyce. I'm really pleased to be here tonight talking to all of you, and what a wonderful crowd. I know many of you, but since there's so many new faces, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction about who I am, how I got here, and why I should be your next county commissioner. I was the 6th of 8 children, and I was raised in rural upstate New York. My parents were very civic-minded and truly believed in volunteerism. They tried to instill that in all of us. We arrived in Plymouth in 1997 for my husband's new job, and we had our kids who were 2 and 5 at the time. I am so happy I got to raise them in Plymouth. Professionally, I just retired as a nurse practitioner. I've been a nurse for over 40 years, a family nurse practitioner for 20 years, and I've been part of the Plymouth area medical community for over 25 years. I've had jobs diverse as school nursing, women's health, and of course, family nurse practitioner. Soon after I arrived in Plymouth, I was able to meet Deb Reynolds and Martha Richards, and I knew they were my people. And they got me to volunteer for the local Democrats. I was one of the hardy few, as many of you here also were, who staffed the unheated and very cold trailer that was donated by Bob Crowley at the old Hitchner site. When Deb and Martha thought that they needed something more organized and came up with PAD, I was all in, and I was the first secretary of PAD.
Yay!
I've cared for the community in other ways, trying to follow my parents' example of volunteerism. I volunteer where there's a need, and I've been fortunate to be on the board of several local organizations. Some of those are Genesis Behavioral Health, which is now Lake Sturgeon Mental Health, the Plymouth Elementary School PTA, Penny Baker Soccer, and I'm very proud to say that I'm the newest board member of Plymouth Area Community Closet. Politically, in addition to my volunteerism, I was elected to 4 terms, which is 12 years on the Plymouth Elementary School Board. So, county commissioner is something that we don't hear much about, but it's really vitally important. And I see it as analogous to what we did on the school board, but on a greater scale. We really need to look at the agencies and entities of the county and their needs and their wants, and really balance that with for the good of all of our citizens. We know that Grafton County is aging. From 2010 to 2022, the percentage of our citizens over 65 increased by about 50%, from just about 15% to over 23% of the population. In addition to the aging population, we have not had much growth of our total population, so our tax base is pretty flat. The county has a nursing home, it has a jail, a farm, it does the sheriff's office, we protect vital records like deeds, and we're responsible for our aging courthouse. I see my healthcare background as invaluable with issues relating to, especially to the nursing home. We know that healthcare in the United States is very complicated, and that makes running a nursing home really challenging. One of the biggest problems we have right now is lack of staffing, and that impacts us in so many ways. First and foremost, if we don't have enough staff, we may not be able to provide for the exceptional care that the residents of the nursing home deserve. But also, we have people who need long-term care, and if we're not able to open all of the beds, they don't have any place to go. If we want to look at this from the fiscal side of it, if our beds aren't open, our revenue is down, and then we get in this vicious cycle of more issues with staffing. I also see my healthcare background as important with the jail. We know that many people are in the jail because of substance use disorders or substance misuse. We need to address that both when they're inmates and when they're released. Other issues that I'm just going to touch very briefly on is our farm has some of the same staffing issues as the nursing home. If we're not able to raise enough crops, then we have less fresh local food for our nursing home residents and the inmates at the jail. And finally, it's too big a topic, but the county courthouse really needs a lot of work, and that will be something that we have to address. I'm happy to answer any questions, and I can do that at the right time. You could also email me at electkatiehedberg@gmail.com. I'm asking for your vote, both at the primary and in the general election in November. And finally, if any of you would like to donate to my campaign, I have an ActBlue account, or you could give donations tonight to either me or my lovely fiscal agent, Deb Reynolds. I'm so happy to see you all here tonight, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Katie. That was excellent. All right, next I'd like to bring up another local, Jason Ninos, who is running for county treasurer. We're getting to know Jason pretty well.
Just don't judge me on my outfit, because I was not expecting to come up and talk today. So I'll keep this short. My name is Jason Ninos. I'm a local here in Plymouth. I moved here 5 years ago when I got a job at Plymouth State University in their academic technology department. And one of the reasons I moved here is because of the Plymouth area and the schools and everything like that. And as a former educator, I believe in public service and public good. And that's why I do my best to find places where I can serve. I volunteer on the Plymouth Elementary PTA. I work on the Plymouth Energy Commission, and I'm a Cub Master in the local Cub Scouts. And so I really believe in public service, and that's why I'm running for Grafton County Treasurer. Dr. Hedberg is a tough act to follow, but one of the things she talked about is we have to fund these things. And as a treasurer, one of the things I would look at is expanding our ways that we can raise funds. With one of the instances being, in our last report, all our funds were invested in local Grafton County banks, which is great. But also, we could be investing our funds in other places to get better interest or better return to our interest. And so, I would like to see us diversify our funds and revenues in order to fund the programs that Dr. Hedberg would get as our county commissioner, and making sure we can fully staff our farm and our hospital, our nursing home, and rehabilitate our courthouse. And so I'm here because I want to serve. I'm here because as I working in education, I'm used to doing a lot with a little bit of money, and I want to make sure our money can go a long way. And I want to do that as your county treasurer. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. All right, next up is, we have two more local folks. So next up is Stuart Green, who is running for Senate District 7. And that includes the pad towns of Bristol, Bridgewater, and Alexandria. But we want to make sure that all of us support him as much as we can. So would you come up, Stuart?
Good evening. I'm just curious if there is actually anybody from those three towns here. Okay, so I'm actually speaking to a very select audience tonight. I appreciate the fact that the rest of you are willing to go through and listen. As it was just stated, I'm running for Senate District 7, which is really mostly in Merrimack County. And I'm running against a gentleman named Dan Innes, who effectively ran unopposed in the last election cycle. So we're going to fix that this time. And I've only got 5 minutes, so I'll tell you the one issue that really kind of lights my fire. That's public education. I'm one of those privileged individuals who went to both a mix of public and private schools, and I can see that we have a healthy constellation in the state, but we cannot have a voucher system that is siphoning away funds from a public education system. And so after protecting democracy, of course, which is the primary reason we're all here, if we're honest, that would be mission number one for me, is dismantling the entire EFA system and making school funding much more fair in accordance with the Claremont decisions and the following decisions that were made later on. It is unconscionable the way that we do this right now. It drives me absolutely crazy because it's selfish the way it's currently done, and we all benefit from having a well-educated population. And by the way, some of these other problems that were highlighted tonight about not having enough staffing, not having people that are skilled in certain trades, not having young working families that are willing to come work here, it all comes back to the schools. None of these things can be fixed if we don't have a good, robust school system that gives us a common sense of experience and a common narrative as a society. But if we break apart to go with a libertarian dream of tent cities and gated communities, we will not be able to compete with Russia. We won't be able to compete with China. And we will have a very serious third world experience before you know it. We're on the precipice of that right now in this state. About half of our Republicans that are sitting in the legislature are false flag libertarians. It's a much more dire problem than a lot of people realize. So we need to expose that. And Dan Innes is not one of those, but he might as well because he always votes the party line every single time, no matter what it is. And thank you, Senator, for affirming that. And by the way, he doesn't show up for committee vote either. Why should you support me? Well, I'm one of these rare guys who, and actually there are many, I shouldn't say rare, an unrealized number of individuals who are left-leaning on the political spectrum, but have a lot of military experience. I'm a 20-year naval intelligence officer. I retired as a commander in 2019. I served as a accredited diplomat in Norway. In fact, I just remade a connection here. I was the director of the Maritime Intelligence Operations Center in Norfolk. I deployed to combat theaters 3 different times. I looked for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So I have a little bit of experience with leadership. I have a little bit of experience bridging gaps. And I will do that. I will work across the aisle where it's appropriate, and I will form a blocking action where that is appropriate too. So I think I'm probably at time already. If you want to support my candidacy, I too have an ActBlue account. I have signs in my truck if it happens to be the appropriate town that you live in, and I welcome any support otherwise that we can get. So let's do this. We can get it.
Thank you, Stuart. And, I know you have just a small section of our group, but I think our reach is pretty good. A lot of people, we have a really good email list, and, this will be broadcast, so we'll try to reach out for you. So we have one more person that would like to speak, and that's Corinne Morse. Where's Corinne? Here she is. Okay.
Hello, can everyone hear me? Thank you. My name is Corinne Morse. I've been a representative from Canaan for the last 2 years, and I have served on the executive committee for the delegation for those 2 years as well. Working closely with the county commissioners and administrators and county treasurer to make sure that our budget is being taken care of appropriately, funded appropriately, balanced appropriately. And during those 2 years, I really realized that while the work being done in Concord is incredibly vital, my passion is really with county government. It's really where I felt most at home. It's where I felt that I can make the biggest difference. And so I'm running for county treasurer. I moved to New Hampshire about 6 years ago from Washington State. It was sort of a little bit on a whim. My husband got a job. We packed up our kids, we packed up our house, and we moved across the country. And it was the best decision that we've ever made. So we got here late 2018, and just about in time for us to figure out where everything was and meet a few people, COVID hit. So we hunkered down and we got through online kindergarten and preschool and all of those things. So definitely had the opportunity to recognize how important public school teachers are during those years. And then coming out of the pandemic, I really realized I needed to make better connections with my community. So I've run for a few offices. I am on the Canaan Planning Board, where Tom Opal and I are working on the master plan together. I am on the Mascoma School Budget Committee. Let's see, the Canaan Economic Development Committee, several others. I spend as much of my time dedicated to the committee, to the town committees, and to the state as I can, because I really believe that teaching my children, that being invested in volunteer work in communities and looking for the future is the only way that we can make a true difference. So I hope that you'll all support me in my attempt to become county treasurer so that I can live out my dream there in the table and cut the cows and balanced budgets. And yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Corinne. Now we're going to take a 10-minute break. Anybody who has not had food yet, which includes me, we're going to go dip in, and it's time to hydrate and dehydrate. There's coffee in the back. If anybody, it's kind of hot for coffee, but if you want it, you can have it. And has anybody seen Colin yet? Okay, so we don't have to worry about that. All right, so we'll take 10 minutes and then we'll come back and have our main speaker. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm in the thick group that's running for chair.
I know.
I didn't know anything about this. Yeah. I told you, I didn't expect it to do a presentation. Introduce myself. I thought this is almost my family.
I can't remember his name, but I love that. And I was
So he stepped aside. He's about 80 to 90. Someone else that was names. Well, I just put my email down and I just signed up. Hi.
Do you know his name?
I'm sorry, who?
Gentleman in the plaid shirt.
Black Stu. His name is Stu Green.
Stu?
Yes, ma'am.
Because he said he was representing Bridgewater, Bristol.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hill. Forgotten south of here, yeah. So, but he's running for, yeah, Senate District 7. Yes. One of those. He did mention to me he's also a PhD student at Tufts. So. But I live here. Okay. And I know that struggle. I live here in Plymouth, and I went to graduate school at UMass Amherst, and I drove back and forth. He's a super, super nice, friendly guy. So feel free to talk to him. Yeah. Oh, yeah. One of the few. So my stepmother, Val Scarborough, her family has a place in Hebron, which is similar.
Oh, very much. I prayed for Al Biden's
Yeah.
during the primary. On my Bridgewater voting.
Good for you.
Well, yeah, I mean,
It's not.
I
I
did
mean,
it for 4.5 hours.
Bridgewater is.
Because I refused to leave the Trump people, the
Yeah.
only ones with a sign.
Bridgewater is tough. Bristol's another one. Bristol's another one. And unfortunately, there's just a streak of fanaticism that's really just.
Oh, yeah. Oh, Bridgewater's tough. It's very hard. Maybe it would count to us. It's
I
very
was
hard.
just gonna say I might open the.
Yeah, because it's very hard. So my dad's saying, so I have to write myself a note. What? I'm writing myself a note because I don't remember diddly squat. I know. I want to go against Oh, I know. What was it? Well, we just went down and talked to him. Okay, so let's see. He says he has an AC. Oh, that is so much nicer than that open. I'm gonna open it up.
How are you? Doing well. Yeah, good luck. It's being you. No, probably not. Promoting it a lot on
Hello. If everybody could get themselves resettled, our featured speaker is here.
I'm guilty of it too, and I'm always. It's like, and then she's like, it was very shaky.
Everybody grab themselves some dessert and there is some coffee. So I would like to say that we all know Colin pretty well. Are we settling down here? All righty. Senator Prentice has the seat. So we all know Colin pretty well. He's been up here quite a few times. He's a well-known commodity in Plymouth, and we're always happy to have him come back. So I'm going to let him introduce his background on his own, but I'm sure we will have a warm welcome for Colin Van Osten, running for Congressional District 2.
Thank you. Thank you so much. How's everyone doing? Good. All right. Last time I was here was as one of many volunteers for the Right and Biden effort. Yes, exactly. Anyone who volunteered in any way for that, raise your hand. That is a large part of the room. Let's hear a round of applause for all of them. Thank you. It was one of those crazy New Hampshire stubborn things that everyone out of the state thinks is the worst idea in the world. And we actually reminded them that it doesn't really matter what national parties tell you to do. It doesn't really matter what people in Washington, D.C. think. What matters is that people vote. And the New Hampshire primary was going to be first, come hell or high water. A lot of people here wanted to vote for the one man who is standing between us and a Trump dictatorship, and that's Joe Biden. And even if his name wasn't going to be on the ballot, tens of thousands of people in the state came up. They wrote his name in. He actually got more votes, by the way, as a Democratic president not on the ballot than any Democratic president ever has gotten on the ballot of the New Hampshire primaries. True story. And what a testament to the New Hampshire grassroots. I mean, that whole campaign was volunteer driven and it worked and it just was really exciting. So thank you everybody who held signs. Well, it was a lot of us who were working on that. And I'm really looking forward to sharing a little bit about myself. I do see some old friends in the room. I also see some folks who I've never met before in my life. So I'm going to do my best to introduce myself to you and share a little bit about why I'm running for Congress. And I also wanted to say particular thanks to our state senator, Sue Prentice, who is here in the front row. Sue, first of all, is doing a fantastic job for the people of this district in Concord and has a uniquely respected voice there. And I saw her on Sunday night in Hanover at a house party that we had, which was fantastic. And I love Sue, and I love, this is like such a New Hampshire moment too. That I saw her the next day and she said, hey, do you mind if I give you a little feedback on what you said? I said, no, not at all. And she said, how about you think about doing it this way instead of that way? And I think she was exactly right. And she in no way was embarrassed to say that. And like, that is how New Hampshire works and how friends support each other, is to say, I love what you're doing. Here's another way you can think about it. Here's how we can do this together. So thank you for doing that. And I'm going to try to not screw it up now. So slightly different than my normal stump speech, but bear with me. So let me start with this. I have heard a lot of politicians give a lot of speeches in my time and make a lot of promises. And I think often what matters the most is not the promises people give, but when they show you a little bit about who they actually are. So I want to share a little bit about my personal background and my values. And I'm also going to talk about why I'm running for Congress and some of the issues facing our country, but I want to start with the personal stuff first, because I think when the going gets tough, that's what really matters for folks when they're elected officials, is who they are, who they fight for, what they really care about. So I moved to the state when I was 22 years old for a job, and it was the 18th house I ever moved into. And if you do the math, that is a lot of moving. Sometimes people ask if I came from a military family, and while my grandfather was in the Marines, neither of my parents served, and they just were really indecisive. And I'm trying to figure out a more diplomatic way to say that, but that actually is the diplomatic way. We moved around a lot. For me, usually the first day of school was not the first day of a new grade, it was the first day of an actual new school. And that was true my whole life growing up. And when I came to New Hampshire, I never really had one place that felt like home before. I moved when I was 6 months old. So like, people ask where you're from, and I don't even know how to answer that question sometimes. But what I found here was the first home that I've ever had. I met my wife 2 weeks after I moved to New Hampshire on a softball field. She does not remember meeting me, but I remember the day that I met her. And now we have 2 boys, 10 and 13 years old, whose lives mean everything to us in the world right now. I moved here to actually work in politics. I worked for about 5 years in my 20s for people like Jane Shaheen. I helped Annie Custer the first time she ever ran for Congress. I helped her with her campaign. But by my mid-20s, I basically knew I wanted to do something different, and I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life except be with Kristen, my wife. And Kristen moved up to Hanover to go to business school, and so I moved up to be with her. And I worked at the college for a while. I worked at a local restaurant for a while downtown. And the closest I ever got to leaving in a serious way was after I enrolled myself to go to business school. She looked like she was having a lot of fun, and so I wanted to follow her and did that. We were there for 3 years. I had an offer to go work out at Apple out in California. And it was a fascinating company. This was when Steve Jobs was still alive. And I thought seriously about it. It was right after the iPhone had come out, for context, before there was something called an App Store. Actually, the job was to work on the App Store. And I interviewed with a bunch of people, thought about it. I came back and I bought a puppy and an engagement ring. And we decided together to make our lives about a place, not about a profession. A lot of people decide to be a doctor or a lawyer or a marketer or to work in the energy industry or to farm. For us, we decided we wanted to make our lives about a place, and that place is New Hampshire. And we began to put down roots. I have found that you can work in world-class institutions right here in New Hampshire. I found my way to a job at Stonyfield Yogurt. Fascinating employer, truly sets the world standard on environmental sustainability and doing it while being a for-profit company. So these things are not at tension. I know what it means to create jobs. I know what it means to hire people. I know what it means to manage a budget and a P&L in good times and in tough times. But doing that in the context of understanding what is your impact on the community? What is your impact on the world? We took thousands of pounds of toxic persistent pesticides off our crops. That sort of thing is part of how you have to value the work that you're doing as well. I really enjoyed that job. I found my way to work at Southern New Hampshire University to help launch an online college for working adults to get a degree without debt. Nearly 10,000 students got a degree, most with taking on zero student debt at all. The most common amount for those who did take on loans was less than $2,500. And this was personal for me because when I had gone to college, remember I'd been moving around a lot. When I went to college, I had no health insurance for 4 years. Lived, hoping I wouldn't break a leg or get sick or something. I ran out of loans my senior year, graduated with a full slate of loans and $30,000 on a credit card of tuition. They don't let you do this anymore, but back then you could actually put tuition on your credit card. I'm glad they don't allow you to do it anymore. So it was really personal for me. So when SNU was starting this new online college, I went to work there before we took our first paying student in this program. And it was fascinating, great place to learn. And right now, SNU, Southern New Hampshire University, is actually the largest nonprofit provider of higher education in the country. And that's right here in New Hampshire. Like that is something for us all to be proud of. And along the way, this funny thing happened to me. And whenever Karen is with me, I feel like I have to be careful about how I say this. But I don't think anyone as a kid dreams of being an executive counselor when they grow up. But in the summer of 2011, some people here may remember, our executive council, for the first time ever, did something that they had never broached before. It never had even been controversial before. It was a 5-0 all Republican executive council, and it had never been an issue before. And yet in 2011, they voted to shut funding off for birth control and cancer screenings and annual exams in our state Planned Parenthood health centers. And it shocked a lot of us. This didn't used to, we're not talking about funding for abortion, we're talking about birth control. Like these are fundamentally, we thought, non-controversial propositions, or at least in my generation. And I spent some time that summer trying to find someone to run against my executive counselor. His name was Dan St. Hilaire. He had led the effort. It was a red district at the time, and he was a pretty popular, kind of had put himself out as a moderate Republican. And I did not have a lot of luck finding anyone to run against him. Finally, I was on a dog walk with my friend Lindsay, who worked at the Women's Fund at the time. And we were talking about it and brainstorming. I said, what about Sylvia? She didn't want to do it. And Lindsay said, Colin, why don't you run? And I didn't have a good answer to her in that moment. And I went home and I talked to Kristen about it. And she thought it was a good idea, which also surprised me a little bit. And then I went and I talked to Annie Custer. And I had a very honest, one of those heart-to-heart conversations you have with a mentor. I said, Annie, I'm 31 years old. I have a 1-year-old at home. I have not slept consistently in a year. I still have tens of thousands of dollars of student debt. And I don't know if it makes sense for a 31-year-old straight white guy to run to get Planned Parenthood funding. Is this even my fault? Is this okay? And I will never forget what she said to me. She said, Colin, this takes all of us. If it is only women who remember life before Roe, we are never going to win. It has to be across gender and across generation. We have to be doing this together. It is the way that we win. And it gave me a huge amount of confidence. I ran for office. Chris Pappas ran that same year, who's a great congressman for us now on the eastern half of the state. Deborah Pignatelli ran, who had served on the council before. We won. We got a majority on the council. It went from 5-0 Republican to a Democratic majority. and we got Planned Parenthood funding restored. It actually we had to do it twice. After the next election, they took one seat back, and we had to fight back and get it again. We did. We got it funding restored twice. We also, this was right after President Obama had passed the Affordable Care Act. And you might remember when that was passed nationally, part of the way it finally got through was it was left up to each state to decide whether and how to implement it. We had a huge fight. A number of folks here who were in the legislature at the time were fighting for something called Medicaid expansion. And it barely happened. It ended up being a 3-2 vote on the Executive Council. We expanded Medicaid and implemented the Affordable Care Act. That was 10 years ago. Today, 100,000 of our fellow citizens have gotten cheaper, better health care because the Affordable Care Act was implemented here in New Hampshire. It has made a huge, and by the way, we did it without a sales tax or an income tax. Like all the threats that they made at the time didn't come to pass. I ran for governor in 2016. I was your Democratic nominee for governor, had a healthy, vibrant primary, three-way race, won the primary by 30 points against 2 other candidates who I think really highly of, and was off to the races, and I lost very narrowly to Chris Sununu. It turns out 2016 was a pretty rough year for Democrats. And Chris Sununu was a tough person to run against, 100% name ID at the beginning of the race. But I won this exact congressional district against Chris Sununu in as hard of a year as we've had in the last decade. And I know that we can win this race again. I really do. I also know that while we've made some progress, there are some issues that we've taken one step forward and several steps back. It is great that we got Planned Parenthood funding restored. But what happened 2 years ago on Monday is a travesty. I am 45 years old. For 43 of those years, women had certain fundamental rights that the US Supreme Court took away 2 years ago on Monday this week. And I will not stop until we pass a national law to protect the full range of reproductive rights. That means birth control and IVF and abortion access, no matter where you live. We have to get this done. This is why we have a US Congress, to put our values into law. We can't rely on the Supreme Court anymore. We have to pass a law to protect the full range of reproductive rights. So these are the things that motivate me in this race. I've seen how we've made good progress for people in New Hampshire. I've seen that sometimes it's hard and we have to be persistent. But now I look at what's happening in Washington. And to be totally candid, if it wasn't for Annie retiring, I would be very happy to continue spending most of my time being a good dad and a good husband, or trying to be. Working in our private sector, which is an awesome and vibrant place here in New Hampshire. And it was a little bittersweet when Annie decided to retire. But I know that she made it look easy. The truth is this is a very purple district that we live in. When I beat Chris Sununu in this district in 2016, it was by 1 point. That year, Maggie Hassan won this district by 2. There is not a lot of room for error. And occasionally we do have good years, and it feels great as Democrats to think, oh, things are going well. But the truth is I lived through 2002 and through 2010 and 2016. And we have to be ready for years like that. We have to nominate candidates who can win even in environments like that. And that means representing the full range of our district. Democrats and Republicans and independents. I worked really hard when I was on the Executive Council to build a broad coalition. I was proud in 2016, most of Bernie's steering committee in the state of New Hampshire supported me in that primary, and most of Hillary's. And by the way, the 22-year Republican who held the seat before me, Peter Spalding, he supported me for re-election too, across party lines. He had been John McCain's co-chair in the state. And I think that's the sort of, when our leaders are at their best, they really work to lead everybody. And I know that's what we have to do to win this race. So to me, what this race comes down to, the reason folks are here, and I know it's not for me, it's because we look at what's going on in our country and we are worried. We are scared, we're sometimes angry. When I say we, I don't just mean Democrats in this room. I'm talking about our friends and neighbors. I'm talking about folks who have a Trump sign up on their lawn, are also worried about what's happening in this country. They're also scared, they're also angry sometimes. We should remember that there's some common ground there. I think some of the common ground is that a lot of us feel betrayed. We look at Washington, we're a little bit embarrassed by what we see, and it feels like there either is so much sand that's been thrown in the gears of our government by the very far extremists on the right that are just trying to make it not work, or that there are very powerful special interests that get their way when they need it, but that there aren't enough people who are fighting for families like the one that I grew up in. And if I'm happy to take some questions and go deep on the specific issues, I'm kind of a good government wonk and nerd, so there are some things I get really passionate about, like ranked choice voting or independent redistricting. I represented what became a very gerrymandered district, Supreme Court ethics reform, all of these, and a big part of my campaign, trying to get dark money out of politics. I do not take corporate PAC money. I'm very skeptical of all of that out-of-state stuff that floods into our state here. But the truth is, I think that how we get this country back on track is not just dealing with the symptoms, we have to deal with the problem itself. The problem is that we need a government that is on the side of regular people again. And we have occasional brilliant moments of that, but too often that hasn't been the case in Washington. We can do that by passing a national law to protect reproductive rights. I believe a huge portion of our country will see that happen and will believe their government is starting to have their back again. And I know it seems hard. You look at how hard things are in Washington right now. Kansas, Kentucky, Ohio, these are deep red states that have had referendums on whether or not to protect a woman's right to choose, and a woman's right to choose has won in Kansas, in Kentucky, in Ohio. Like, we can do something about this, but we have to have the courage to fight for it, not just to hope that the court fixes things. I also hear most of my time over the last 6 or 8 years has been trying to be a good dad, and so I spend a lot of time on the sidelines of kids' sports games. And you will hear parents talk about politics without ever mentioning the word politics. They don't like to talk about politics per se, but you will hear parents talking about how you can't move right now in New Hampshire because housing prices have doubled and mortgage rates have doubled. And if you move across town, your monthly housing costs triple in 2024. You will hear folks talk about how they can't get a kid off a child care wait list, and so they or their spouse can't take a new job because it feels like the wait list goes forever. Or folks who are struggling with high healthcare costs or dealing with healthcare costs for a family member or having a student move back who's dealing with student debt. And my point is this, there are a lot of issues at stake in this election, and I'm happy to dig into them in questions. But if we don't do something on reproductive rights, if we don't do something on lowering basic household costs, particularly housing, people are not going to trust their governments there for them. And I believe those are the things that we also have. Our democracy is an existential threat. Our climate is an existential threat. There's a long list of things we need to tackle. But if we don't tackle those two things first, it's going to be much, much harder to make progress. So I am an optimist at heart. I have seen when things are dark and dire, when we had a 5-0 Republican Executive Council, when they were doing crazy things. I've seen how people running can make a difference and make progress. I've seen 100,000 of our fellow citizens get cheaper, better health care because of the president we elected, because of the Executive Council and the legislature we elected. Now we've got to do that this fall. And I'm here very specifically to ask for your help. I'm going to take questions if we have time for it, but also I want to point out Rachel in the back has a clipboard. And the only way this campaign works is the grassroots way. We are starting organizing Zoom meetings, just like the Write It Biden campaign had. We have a weekly newsletter that goes out, but it only works if we know who you are. So if you're not regularly already getting a weekly newsletter for us that goes just to supporters, please sign up and let us know you're a supporter, and we'll get this done together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. Let's do some questions. Who has a question? I know you guys always have questions. Let's see. Okay. Please speak to how you feel about the red flag laws. I can hear. Red flag laws.
So repeat the question. It was about red flag laws. So if you're not familiar with red flag laws, this is a set of ways, both at the state and the national level, to ensure that folks who've demonstrated that they have unsafe tendencies don't have ready access to firearms. So there are certain circumstances where I think one of the most obvious examples is someone who's been involved in an active domestic dispute. Them having access to firearms is extremely dangerous. Folks who've had struggling with severe mental health episodes sometimes are kind of in a similar category. I think about this from two perspectives. The first is that I'm a father of a 10-year-old and a 13-year-old. Last fall, there was a shooting at the state hospital in Concord. For context, my 13-year-old was walking home that day as it happened. if you know Concord, you know Runlet Middle School to where we live, which is near the high school, goes about 2 blocks away from the state hospital where this happened. So I have this experience that way too many parents have today, which is that the moment something like that happens, you immediately are on 6 different text chains with other parents. Where's Sam? Who can pick up Sam? It is a unfortunate binding tie for way too many parents of this generation to be scared of where their kids are in a moment. And that particular shooting I mentioned because it was someone who had significant mental health challenges, who actually previously once had had access to firearms taken away, and then New Hampshire had changed its law to allow folks to more easily carry a concealed weapon even after an incident like that. So I absolutely believe that we need some basic common sense gun violence prevention laws, including red flag laws, including background checks, including closing some of these loopholes. The second perspective I come at it from, just for full candor, I'm a gun owner myself. So this is the casing of a shotgun shell. I go bird hunting a few times a year. I'm not afraid of that. I actually think it's a really important part of our culture. It's a great way to enjoy the outdoors here. And I say, as a gun owner myself, I mean, my guns have a trigger lock. My gun has a trigger lock. It's in a gun safe. We keep the ammunition separate. We treat these things seriously, as I believe the overwhelming number of firearm owners do. I also know that most of us who own firearms support background checks. Most of us who own firearms support red flag laws. And it is only the lobbyists in Washington on behalf of the NRA and these other national groups that have polluted this debate until it's so difficult to make common sense progress. And I actually believe that both as a parent and a gun owner, that I can come into this conversation from a place where I'm looking for common ground with folks, but I know where the lines are. Like, my line is I'm keeping my kids safe, full stop. Today, gun violence is the #1 cause of children and teens dying in our country. The #1 cause. There's no way we can let this continue without taking
action. Okay. Carolyn.
Thank you so much for what you've just said, but if you don't mind, I would like to follow up remark and your comment. You probably have heard that our Surgeon General has declared today that what you've just talked about represents a public health emergency. I think this is something that really kicks it up to the next level. And so maybe this will cause you to reflect, as it will be, because I'm running for office, as well, to reflect about what can be said and what should be said to our constituencies, and how we really need to grab this and just say, stop the slaughter, stop the killing of innocents. We know who is getting murdered, and we know who the murderers are, and we can do something about it. Just don't have to be passive about it any longer. Thank you.
We have another question. Yes, hi, Katie.
Really, it's just a comment. We talk a lot about gun violence in schools and whatnot, but our biggest problem with gun violence and guns in the home are suicides. And we have so many suicides by guns because people don't need to plan it. They can just go get their guns. So the red flag laws are great, and we need them to protect all of our children. My son is a school teacher, and his assistant principal was attacked by a knife this year at school. So we know those things happen, but we also need to look to protect our people from themselves, which is one of the main arms of the red flag laws.
Thanks, Katie. Anyone? Karen.
I'll give Karen my cue first, but I just wanted to mention, so I appreciate you mentioning suicide. And I also think that we are dealing with a confluence of several challenges right now. Gun violence is a significant one. We're also dealing with a mental health epidemic that is really rising to the levels of a public health emergency as well. Yesterday, the State Women's Foundation, on which I sit on the board, put out their status of girls in New Hampshire. The statistic of the number of girls who experience depression in our state is staggering. They have been doing this report every 2 years for decades, and it is stunning to see how high these levels have gone, particularly for young girls. I think about this a lot as the parent of 2 young boys and think about what they're dealing with social media. We have, by the way, not regulated the tech industry as we do virtually every other consumer product that we have in our lives. They have a lot of influence in Washington. And I also think that we need to take away some of the stigma when we talk about these things. So in the interest of kind of sharing my story, when I was a sophomore in high school, my stepdad, he struggled with fairly significant mental health issues in the years leading up to that. Thank God we didn't have a gun in our household at the time. But I know that that is not an uncommon story. The truth is that so many of us have families that have been marked by the sorts of things that I have seen in my own life. Folks in your immediate family dealing with substance abuse issues, folks dealing with mental health issues, dealing with the wake of suicide. These are not rare occurrences. They're actually something that far too many of us see. And the reason I mention this is just I think part of what we need to do is get rid of the stigma on these things and talk about them in settings like these and recognize these are public health issues that we need to work on together. So thank you.
Reproductive rights is one of my major topics, and you've addressed that. Another one that's really important for me, many of you know my teenager Zoe. Zoe, my teenager, is non-binary and trans. And so the attacks on trans people, especially over the last several years, have been really painful in our family. But I see these attacks as connected to the attacks on women's reproductive rights, about attacks on autonomy, attacks on choice, attacks on people's ability to express themselves freely. And so I'm wondering if you can comment on that, because it's a state issue here in New Hampshire, but it's also clearly part of a national movement as well.
Thank you for asking about it, particularly in the middle of Pride Month as well. I mentioned I have a 10 and a 13-year-old. Being a parent is humbling, and it also is an extraordinary learning experience. And I start from thinking like, our kids are all right. I am learning so much from my own kids, and there's kind of a level of acceptance in their generation where not conforming to a traditional gender dichotomy is a little bit more like being left-handed than anything else now. Like, it's not the norm, but it's not that uncommon either. And there are plenty of folks in both of my children's classes who are close friends who either are non-binary or or gay or bi. Like, these are things, honestly, when I was in 5th grade and 8th grade, we didn't really understand in the same way. I didn't really talk about in the same way. And I just find it affirming that our children's generation is starting to kind of accept each other and include each other in a really unique way. I also, as a parent, think the attacks on kids' sports particularly are just so repugnant. I mean, I have seen my kids get so much out of basketball. Like, they learn teamwork, they learn hard work, they learn love of sport, they start to trust each other. The idea that you would take this away from any child is just so horrible. Like, it is so basic to human dignity to ensure that everyone should be able to have a chance like that to be in a kid's sport. And so to put politics in the middle of it, I find really disgusting. I believe the root cause is that our democracy is at pretty significant risk right now. And I think a lot of us here recognize the existential crisis that we're facing in our democracy. What that means is we are at risk in too many areas of minority rule, of a very small number of very strident voices setting our national laws, setting our national norms. And I believe the connection is that for those who are undemocratic, and that's, I'm not saying all Republicans are that way. I actually think there are many Republican and independent Democratic constituents who all have concerns about what's going on in Washington. But a lot of what we've seen from Donald Trump, from Republican leaders in Washington, is an anti-democracy effort. And the reason they're trying to take rights away is because if all of us have full autonomy over our lives, our health, and our economic ability, then minority rule is not going to work in this country. And so when folks are trying to take rights away from LGBTQ individuals, when they're trying to take rights away from women, when they're trying to make women act like second-class citizens or not have control over their own economic destiny, not being able to choose when and how to have a child. Those are decisions that are trying to prevent us from having everyone be included in our democracy because minority rule is the end goal. I think it's very dangerous, and I think some of these things are very connected.
Colin, I'm curious. You mentioned your decision about what to accept into the campaign finance reports. I happen to think that I've done political campaigns around the country for more than 30 years. Sometimes unilateral disarmament means we get beat.
Yeah.
I think Citizens United has turned one person, one vote into $1 one vote. And the fact that it was reported by mass media, New York Times, Washington Post, that Trump had outraised Biden. And the way he did it was he had one contribution of $50 million from one individual. And that's why he raised a little bit more than Joe Biden. So I guess my question is, people say, we got to out-organize, we got to, seriously, what can we do about dark money? What can we do about the influence of money? You're going to be hopefully one congressman in 435, but that's distorting the process. And I think whether you're a Democrat or frankly, many of the Trump voters, I think, are just so disgusted by feeling like they have no control. They have no say. Their vote doesn't count because I heard this today from somebody at a local bank. She's 36 years old. She's never voted because the politicians are going to do what they're going to do, and I can't control it because big money controls it. How do we change that?
So it's a very big question. You're asking about two things. One is kind of in campaigns, the idea of unilateral disarmament. What should we do? What should we not do? But also, how do we fix the system itself? I mean, ultimately, what we need is we do need a U.S. constitutional amendment to overturn Citizens United. That is not a short path. It is not an easy path. I actually don't think it's either a red or blue issue, though. I think there's huge common ground on this. It just, part of it is you have to take people who fight for this sort of thing. 10 years in Congress, there was no one, more or less, almost no one, who said they would refuse corporate PAC money. Now there are about 100 Democrats, almost no Republicans, but about 100 Democrats. So we're not there yet. But I would rather be one of those 100 and have it be 110 or 120 or 150. And I do think there are some lines, and taking corporate PAC money is the example of something that I think many voters understand that very specifically, that taking corporate PAC money is one of the problems in Washington. And I think that it is a way you can demonstrate that you are accountable to the people. It's not the only one. Most of the money that we raise is from people right here in New Hampshire. And I'm accountable to the voters of New Hampshire, by the way. There are some things that we can do, like require more disclosure, which wouldn't take U.S. constitutional amendments, but we could pass the Disclose Act. There's a lot of self-dealing that happens in Congress. There's something called the Stock Act that 100 different members of Congress have violated when they essentially trade private stocks based on insider knowledge. And we can add more teeth to that. And I think some of these things are realistic because I think that we can get some Republicans on board with it too. Again, it's not just a red versus blue issue. So I think we got to keep fighting for it. The first policy platform I put out in this campaign was a reform agenda for things like banning members of Congress from holding individual stocks or trading individual stocks, getting dark money out of politics. But I will. Let me also just be really honest about how this works. I have an opponent myself in the Democratic primary. I've gotten 3 super PAC mailings for her in my own home. And I understand politics well, and I have no idea who's paid for that. And it's June. That's for a primary in September. Okay, so the truth is that powerful interests really like to buy congressional seats, and they will use any avenue that they can to do it. And it is our responsibility in a place like New Hampshire, where we are independent-minded and we are stubborn, that we are going to win the grassroots way, and that we're going to do things like raise our money mainly here in New Hampshire, or reject corporate PAC contributions, or spend our time on the road and having conversations like this. I actually do think this is a place where grassroots campaigning, face-to-face campaigning, those things really do matter. And I think enough voters are concerned across party lines that we can start talking about these things in campaigns more than we did 10 or 20 years ago.
How about one more question? Let's hear from Sally.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you think you can do anything about maybe controlling cryptocurrency, because my concern about that is it's being used to extract money from businesses. They use ransomware. There's a current attack on the auto dealers, and they've done the same thing to hospitals and school districts. What can the federal government do about that?
So Sally, I appreciate the question. For those not familiar with cryptocurrency, we're talking about blockchain technology, and if anybody wants to get really nerdy on kind of exactly how the technology works, we can have a little sidebar. Happy to have a conversation there. But this is a frontier, that in many ways is kind of like the wild, wild west. And what I mean by that is there are good players, there are bad players, there are con men and snake oil salesmen. There are also people who are trying to innovate and find new tools and do great things. So I'll give you a specific example. When I was at Southern New Hampshire University, we actually built some of the first academic transcripts using blockchain technology in the world. And so what I mean by that is, instead of the old way, which is where you would go in and ask for a copy of your academic transcript from your registrar at the college and then wait 6 weeks and pay a fee to get it, that we issued a pilot to students where they could actually just have an app on their phone and have constant permanent access to their own academic files, and they could be verified as accurate through blockchain technology. One of the reasons that that matters is because we had students in 5 different refugee camps across the Middle East and North Africa, places where even accessing an institution or government is quite hard. And so there are times when that sort of innovation in technology can be quite good and quite valuable. There also are times when it can be used by scammers or ransomware or hackers or other things. And so I believe very strongly that we need to set up a fair, transparent regulatory system for it here in the United States of America. There's some legislation that's working through Congress in that regard right now. There are some folks like Ro Khanna, who some folks know here, who's been a great advocate for this, trying to make sure that we have an appropriate, transparent regulatory structure so that we can have innovation in this country, so it's not just things that are happening in the shadows or other places around the world. And I think that legislation, I think it's called FIT 21, is a good start of a way to do that. Right now, the regulatory structure, the laws have simply not been passed, and so a lot of this is up to whatever one regulator thinks might work or might not work. It's frankly very, very confusing. It's hard for companies to build responsibly and safely and legally in this country right now. And so I think we do need to take some important regulatory steps to get that sort of thing right. So thank you for asking about it. I appreciate it. And I want to respect the last question comment. So let me say one thing to wrap up. Is that okay? I can't do this without all of you. I don't just mean that in the abstract. Our campaign is people powered by volunteers, powered by grassroots contributions. If you haven't signed in with Rachel and left your name with us, please do. We will both stick around after this because it only works with enough people coming together to do this. That is, in fact, how we can win. I've won this exact district before. I've done it in a brutally hard year. I've done it against a tough opponent. I know that we can do this together, but it does take a lot of people working. And Annie made it look easy, but it has been 15 years since this has been an open seat. Before her, no Democrat had ever held the seat for more than 1 or 2 terms in a row, going back 150 years. We cannot afford for that to happen. And if you do give me the honor of being your congressman, I think a delegation of Jean Shaheen and Maggie Hassan and myself and Chris Pappas is a really unique snapshot of our state. Different genders and generations and family stages. Jeannie has, she's a grandma. Maggie has adult age kids. I've got school age kids. Chris just got married to his husband last year at the beginning moments of starting a family in his own life. What a great snapshot of all of the different assets that we can bring as a state. So I would be honored to be part of that, but it only works if you will help. Please sign up with us. Please come online to vanwestern.com, leave a grassroots contribution. Do whatever you can to help. I need your help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. We've heard from a number of candidates, so I'm hoping everybody will take a moment to just go and greet those people that have spoken and the other people that are here, because half the room are candidates. So thank you very much, and we are taking a break now. We don't have a meeting in July and August. So the primary is September 10th, and our next meeting is after that. But we have the parade, we have the gubernatorial forum on the 15th. If you haven't signed up, please do. We have a limit of 200, but there are plenty of seats left. So please sign up for that. Gary? The Rumney Old Home Day, we will have a booth there August 10th. We'll also be in Bristol for the Old Home Day there. I presume, Stuart, you might show up for that. So yeah, we're going to be around. Look for your newsletter. We'll let you know what's going on with the newsletter. Thank you, everybody.